Ready to strengthen your reading comprehension? Take a listen.
Let's get right into it. Every time you clock in, log on, or just hand over your time to an employer, something incredibly profound is happening right under the surface of the law. This explainer is all about the legal mechanics behind your everyday paycheck. We aren't just talking about earning a living here. We are looking at exactly how your time translates into owned assets. So let's unpack the hidden legal philosophy of you.
Okay, let's dive into this. It's kind of the ultimate Socratic question for anyone who works for a living. Is a person's labor legally their private property? Think about it. When you are actively working, are you generating an actual asset that the law recognizes as yours right from the jump? Or is it, just a transaction, just an activity? To really understand your rights and your paycheck, we absolutely have to start right here.
Well, to answer that, we first need to define what property actually means when we're talking about personal employment. In the legal world, property isn't just real estate. It's not just a house or a car. Property is a fundamental right to acquire assets by exchanging your labor and your services for money. Your labor is literally the engine through which you acquire personal property. Take away the ability to freely trade your labor, and the whole concept of acquiring property basically falls apart. To see exactly how the highest courts view this, we actually need to travel back a bit. Over a century to 1915, the U.S. Supreme Court took on this landmark case, Coppage versus Kansas. This one is absolutely crucial because it set the legal foundation for how labor and property are intertwined in the United States. The court basically had to decide, is the right to make a contract for your own employment a protected part of your personal liberty and private property? Now, what's really interesting about this is the precise language the Supreme Court used. They declared, and I quote, "The right is as essential to the laborer as to the capitalist, to the poor as to the rich." They recognize that for the vast majority of us, there is literally no other honest way to start acquiring property except by working for it. So this right to trade your labor, it's a universal protection. It applies exactly the same to you, no matter what your economic standing is. The main takeaway from that ruling is incredibly powerful. Labor is the fundamental means of acquiring property. The court made it perfectly clear that arbitrarily interfering with personal employment contracts is a massive impairment of constitutional liberty. So your right to work and trade your labor, it's not just some privilege handed down to you. It is a constitutionally protected liberty. So we've got it established that the law views your labor as the fundamental tool for acquiring property. But that brings us to a really fascinating pivot. When you trade your time, your skills, your sweat for a paycheck, what are you actually trading in the eyes of the law? We know the labor itself is protected, but how does the law treat the tangible exchange? The actual money hitting your bank account on payday. To figure this out, we can't just look at one isolated area of law. We really need to see if this holds up across the board. So we're going to compare two completely different statutory frameworks, the U.S. Civil Rights Code and the U.S. Tax Code. These two attack the definition of exchange property from totally different angles for totally different reasons. Let's see if they actually align. Look at how brilliantly this comparison illustrates the point. On one side, you have Title 42 of the U.S. Code, Section 1982. That's civil rights. Its whole job is to guarantee your right to hold and convey personal property. Then on the flip side, you've got Title 26, Section 80, the Tax Code. Its focus is taxing property transferred for services. Despite living in completely different legal universes, they both arrive at the exact same conclusion. Compensation exchanged for labor is legally recognized property. Let's zoom in on the civil rights protection for a second. Listen to the dynamic action verbs they use here. It guarantees citizens the right to inherit, purchase, lease, sell, hold, and convey property. This is huge because it means whatever you receive in exchange for your labor, whether it's cold hard cash, stock, whatever, falls completely under these active personal property rights. The law is actively and comprehensively empowering you to use what you earn.
And here's the real lightbulb moment. This definition holds up even when the government comes to collect. Under the tax code, specifically Section 83, it dictates that the fair market value of property transferred as compensation for services has to be included in your gross income. Think about that. The government implicitly recognizes your compensation as property, precisely because it taxes its fair market value as your income.
Which brings us to the ultimate heavy hitter, number 5. We've looked at Supreme Court precedent, we've looked at civil rights, we've looked at the tax code. But what is the ultimate shield protecting all of this? It's the Fifth Amendment to the United States Constitution.
Let's see how this all builds together logically. Step 1. As we saw in 1915, your labor is legally recognized as your property, directly tied to your personal liberty. Step 2. Both the Civil Rights Code and the Tax Code affirm that your compensation, what you trade that labor for, is also your property. Which means, Step 3, because both your labor and your compensation are property, they are entirely shielded by the constitutional protections granted to all property. It's a closed loop.
Let me read this exactly because it carries so much weight. The Fifth Amendment explicitly states that no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. This is the bedrock right here. It extends directly to your labor and the property you acquire from it, making sure your right to earn isn't arbitrarily messed with by anyone.
We've covered a ton of legal ground today, right? From 100-year-old Supreme Court cases to the tax code, straight to the Constitution. But the big takeaway here is deeply personal. The law absolutely affirms that your labor and the paycheck you get for it are your fundamental private property. So I want to leave you with this to chew on. Since the law protects your labor as your ultimate private property, how will you choose to value it? Thanks for joining me for this explainer. I really hope this shifts how you look at your time, your effort, and your paycheck.
Bring some bands with ya, or stay a little broke.